Hi, I'm Bud. Welcome to Kimba's Kingdom, the home of everything Kimba the White Lion. On this channel, I'm hoping to connect with fellow Kimba fans like you, so if there's something you'd like to see more of, or less of, let me know in the comments. I want to make the best videos I can for you guys. Today's video is the second in a series exploring the elements it takes to make a great animated series or comic, using the example of Kimba the White Lion, my personal favourite animated series of all time. Specifically, this video will be about getting across the message behind your story clearly, without making your audience feel like they're being lectured or talked down to. And the very first thing I'll say is don't be afraid to put messages in your story. Even some controversial, nuanced, even political messages, even if it's for kids. Honestly, your audience will feel more disrespected if you try to show them an inoffensive, watered-down version of your world than if you try and fail to execute a difficult message. If your story doesn't mean anything, if it isn't trying to say anything about the world or about ourselves, then you're basically saying to your audience that you don't think they're smart enough to handle it. So that's the number one thing. If you have a message you want to include it, throw it in there. Kimba the White Lion does this at every turn. It never shies away from the opportunity to take on a controversial and political topic, even though it's for kids. It encourages them to really think about the world and their place in it, and that's great. Kimba the White Lion doesn't shy away from criticizing poachers, sport hunters, animal experimentation, animal abuse in filmmaking, and even chemical weapons testing, and it doesn't shy away from taking some controversial positions. That sometimes violence is necessary to protect others, that sometimes traditions cause more harm than good and need to be abandoned, that sometimes we have to defy the natural order in order to protect nature. By even dealing with these issues at all, by having the guts to actually say something about them, Kimba is showing a deep respect for its audience. It's trusting its audience to be able to understand and to think about these topics, and the audience appreciates that. But alright, let's say you've already decided that you want to include a message in your animated series or comic. How do you get that message across effectively? We've all heard of show don't tell, and it definitely applies here, but maybe not in the way you'd expect. Certainly don't just state your message at the end like one of Aesop's fables. That's a terrible idea, especially if your narrator or your mentor character states the message at the end. That'll give your audience flashbacks to first grade. But actually, it is okay to have your characters directly talking about the moral issue you want to address. The key is to have them do this close to the start of the episode, before the lesson is learned. And if you can, have multiple characters express different, opposing viewpoints. A great example of this is in the second episode of Kimba the White Lion, The Wind in the Desert. In this episode, the central message is that violence is sometimes necessary to protect others. Right at the start of the episode, three characters directly talk about this issue. Kimba and the two hyenas, Tom and Tab. Kimba tells them, "I don't believe in fighting," and they tell him, "You're not a lion, you're just a pussycat." Then later in the episode, we see the human ranger Bron shooting at the weapon smugglers to defend himself and Kimba realizes that sometimes you have to fight for what's right. The thing that made this effective was that the issue was raised at the start of the episode, and we, the audience, weren't told the correct answer, so we didn't feel like we were being lectured. But the issue of when it's okay to fight was now on our minds. Then throughout the course of the episode, when we saw violence being used to fight for what was right, we thought back to that idea and worked out from what we were shown that, yes, sometimes you do have to fight for what's right. Basically, in short, don't be afraid to have your characters talk about your moral message, but have them talk to each other about it. Don't have them talk directly to the audience. And have them talk about it at the start, so the events of the episode can prove or disprove what they've said. Another crucial aspect of conveying any message through your story is to show how it emotionally affects an individual. If you just tell your audience that, say, climate change is bad, if you show them a bunch of numbers to prove it's bad, or even if you show them a visual of a city full of people being destroyed by a cyclone, they're not going to pay attention. That's just not how stories work. To really make your message work, you have to show, for example, a mother grieving over her child who died in the cyclone. Ideally show us a mother and child who we've gotten to know over the last few episodes to really make us, the audience, connect with them as people and understand that people, individuals, people who could be our friends, family or colleagues, are deeply, directly emotionally affected by your message. This again is where Kimba shines. In the third episode, the message is effectively that traditions can sometimes do more harm than good, and we have to be willing to do away with them to make life better for everyone. And it shows us this by showing us an individual baby giraffe, Geraldine, who has a broken leg, who is going to die according to the long-standing tradition that the weak die and the strong survive. We see Geraldine's fear, we see her mother's grief, we relate to these individual characters suffering emotionally, and we think to ourselves, yeah, screw that tradition. When we see Kimba defy the long-standing law of the jungle and ask humans for help, and Geraldine's life is saved and we see her mother's joy and relief, it really hammers home the message, without the show having to explicitly tell us the message. We already get it. We just saw on screen how defying a tradition can make an individual's life better. That's how a moral message should be done. And Kimba does this again and again. We see the individual tiger's despair about being turned into a monster after he's experimented on by the scientist. We see the main characters we've come to know and love suffer from disturbed sleep and aggressive behaviour when the nightmare narcissus flower, a chemical weapon, is tested in their jungle. We see an individual antelope state of complete emotional despair over the possibility of losing all his friends and family to hunters in a hunting ground. By showing us the emotional effects of these issues on an individual level, on individual characters we know and love and connect with, Kimba gets us to care about the issues in a way that feels natural, not forced, but still impacts us deeply as an audience. So to recap, first of all, include messages in your animated project. Say what you want to say about the world, about people, even about politics. Go for it. Your audience will feel respected if you trust them enough to include your message. Second, you can have your characters talk about the message directly if you want to, but make sure they're talking to each other, not the audience. And do it early in the episode so you can disprove or prove whether they're right. And most importantly, show us how your message affects individual people. Have your audience get to know and connect with characters like best friends, and then have someone's failure to follow your message deeply emotionally affect those characters, to show, not tell us, why your message is important. If you do all these things, your audience will feel respected, and you might even change a few minds and reach a few people who might not have listened otherwise. When it comes to changing the world, there's nothing more powerful than a story. That's all for now, fellow animals. If you enjoyed this video and you'd like to see more, hit the subscribe button and the bell icon so you won't miss a thing. If there's something Kimba related you'd like to see a video about, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your suggestions. I might look ferocious, but I don't bite, promise.